South Africa is a country full of resilience, culture, and ambition. But when it comes to money, the harsh truth is millions are stuck in a cycle of debt, survival, and financial stress. Why are so many South Africans broke? Let's break it down in under 15 minutes with real problems and real talk.
In South Africa, the average monthly salary sits at around R20,000 Rand. But that number quickly loses its weight when placed against the harsh reality of urban life. In cities like Johannesburg and Cape Town, simply surviving, not thriving, just surviving, has become brutally expensive. Rent for a modest one-bedroom apartment can easily eat up half that income. Add to that skyrocketing grocery prices, electricity bills that rise unpredictably, water tariffs, transport costs, data and airtime, and you're left with barely enough to scrape through the rest of the month. And these costs don't rise slowly. They leap ahead, often without warning, while salaries remain painfully stagnant. Even professionals, teachers, nurses, office workers, graduates, are feeling the squeeze, trapped in a financial limbo where qualifications and long hours no longer translate into financial freedom. Instead, they live paycheck to paycheck, watching the cost of living outrun their income and wondering how anyone is expected to keep up. What was once considered a decent salary is now only just enough to keep your head above water. And for many, that gap between what they earn and what life demands grows wider with each passing year. Nearly half of South African adults are trapped in a cycle of debt, many owing more than they actually earn each month. It often starts small: a store account for clothing, a short-term loan to cover groceries or school fees, or a flashy buy now, pay later deal that seems manageable in the moment. But these quick fixes come at a heavy price. Microloans and retail credit often carry sky-high interest rates, hidden fees, and strict repayment schedules that spiral out of control before people even realize what's happening. One missed payment leads to penalties, and soon the original debt has doubled or tripled. What seems like access to financial freedom is actually a cleverly disguised trap. By the time payday hits, many people watch their entire income vanish by the third of the month, eaten up by debit orders, loan repayments, and garnishee deductions. What's left, if anything, has to stretch across food, transport, and household expenses for the next 4 weeks. It's a system designed to keep people just above water, but never able to swim to shore. Debt has become the default for survival, and escaping it feels almost impossible. Black tax may not show up on a payslip or in government policy, but for millions of South Africans, it's a very real part of daily life. It refers to the often unspoken yet deeply felt responsibility many young Black professionals carry to financially support their parents, siblings, extended family, and sometimes even entire households. This responsibility isn't about entitlement, but stems from a long history of structural inequality. For generations, Black South Africans were denied access to wealth-building opportunities like land, education, and decent jobs under apartheid and its lasting impact. So when one person finally makes it, they often become a pillar not just for themselves, but for everyone who helped them get there. It's an act of love, respect, and cultural duty, but it comes at a cost. One paycheck must stretch across rent, groceries, school fees, and transport for several households, often leaving little for savings, investments, or personal growth. Though rooted in gratitude, Black tax places huge pressure on young earners and quietly limits their ability to build generational wealth. It's a cycle that reveals both the strength of communal support and the cracks in South Africa's economic foundation. Many South Africans leave high school knowing how to solve for X, but not how to manage money. While they can calculate angles or recall historical dates, they often enter adulthood without learning how to open a bank account, read a pay slip, or budget. Important concepts like interest rates, savings, and credit scores are barely covered, if at all. So young people are left to figure it out alone, signing confusing contracts, taking on store credit, or maxing out loans they don't fully understand. By the time the consequences hit, it's often too late. The damage is done, and recovery becomes a long, uphill battle. It's not about a lack of ambition, but a lack of financial education. And in a world where financial literacy can decide your future, that missing knowledge is costing young people more than money. It's costing them time, freedom, and opportunity. For many South Africans, especially in urban areas, nearly half their salary disappears instantly, consumed by rent and transport, before food, savings, or anything extra is even considered. Ideally, living near work would cut commuting costs, but city centers are often unaffordable. So, many are forced to live far out, in cheaper areas or informal settlements,
where the daily commute becomes both a financial and physical burden. Hours are lost in overcrowded taxis or unreliable trains. It's not just inconvenient, it's exhausting, risky, and expensive. By the time workers get home, they're too drained for anything else. No time for a side hustle, studying, or family. It creates a vicious cycle, working just to afford the trip to work. The cost of earning a living leaves little beyond survival. And that doesn't just empty wallets, it crushes potential and well-being.
Education may be called free in South Africa, but for low-income families, the reality is very different. School fees are just the start. Parents must also cover uniforms, stationery, transport, textbooks, and daily lunch. For a single parent with multiple children, these costs pile up fast. And school isn't the only pressure. Many rely on the same income to support extended family or meet cultural obligations, funerals, lobola, or ancestral rituals. These aren't optional. They're part of life. So when people say education is a right, it rings hollow for those forced to choose between school shoes and groceries. In truth, managing education costs while meeting social expectations is a constant balancing act, and the burden often falls hardest on those already struggling to stay afloat.
There's a myth that being middle class in South Africa means comfort and stability, but for many, it's a fragile illusion. These families often earn too much for government support, yet not enough to build savings, invest, or feel secure. They may rent homes, rely on credit, and carry black tax, supporting both immediate and extended family. With little to no assets or emergency funds, they live paycheck to paycheck, one crisis away from financial collapse. A car repair, illness, or funeral can unravel everything, forcing hard choices like pulling kids from good schools or delaying healthcare. Social pressure to appear stable often stops people from seeking help. Beneath the surface of making it lies deep vulnerability, and without awareness, this struggling group will continue slipping through the cracks.
Less than 6% of South Africans save money regularly, a number that reflects more than poor habits. For millions, saving is a luxury they can't afford. After paying rent, transport, school fees, groceries, and supporting family, there's nothing left. Survival comes first. Even those who could save often face mental or cultural blocks. Money feels meant for now, not an uncertain future. If you've never had a safety net, saving can feel pointless. But without savings, small emergencies, a sick child, a funeral, a burst tire, can lead straight into debt. And once you're in, high interest and repayment cycles make it hard to get out. This silent crisis won't be solved by tips alone. It needs education that reflects real life and fair opportunities to earn, save, and breathe. In today's image-driven world, especially on social media, there's huge pressure to look like you've made it, even if that illusion is built on debt and quiet anxiety. Lavish weddings, designer clothes, flashy gadgets, and big parties become performances for followers and peers. The pressure to keep up is relentless. Behind the selfies and outfits is often debt, burnout, and desperation to maintain appearances. People spend money they don't have, take out loans for show, and chase temporary validation at the cost of long-term stability. Self-worth gets tied to public perception. Bank accounts suffer, mental health breaks down, and confidence becomes a mask. Until we value authenticity over optics and financial freedom over fake wealth, we'll keep chasing status and stay broke in the process.
The rising cost of living, unaffordable education, transport struggles, and housing issues all add up to more than just numbers. They create chronic financial stress that quietly invades every part of life. It's the stress that keeps you up at night, redoing budgets, worrying about rent, school fees, or surprise bills. It wears down your mental health, making you anxious and overwhelmed. Relationships suffer, not from lack of love, but from pressure that turns dreams into disappointments. The mind, stuck in survival mode, can't focus on long-term goals like saving or building a future. This kind of stress doesn't make headlines, but it's a silent killer, draining energy and dimming hope. You see it in exhausted commuters, jobless graduates, and parents with empty wallets. It's a struggle many silently endure every single day.
Being broke in South Africa isn't always about laziness or bad choices. It's about systems, history, and survival. But that doesn't mean you're powerless. Start small, learn more, speak up. Because the more we understand money, the more we can change our lives and rewrite the story. Which of these do you strongly agree or relate to? Drop a comment. Subscribe for more real talk on money, mindset, and South African truth.